Hello, everybody. Welcome to everyone from around the world. I understand we have many procurement professionals from all over the world. So thank you very much for joining this session and for CIPS for putting on a wonderful conference and a fantastic agenda. My name is Oliver Hurry. I work with procurement and sustainability professionals from all around the world to work with the right peers to solve big problems, be it from carbon emissions in the Scope 3 peer group through to human rights in AIM progress. So I am on a lot of very large Zoom calls with a lot of people talking about big problems, and so this is all very normal to me. But I'm delighted to be joined by an absolute sustainable procurement dream team today. If I could have chosen the best people to have together with me to tackle this question today, then I couldn't have chosen a better panel. So we are going to be talking about really two issues that are combined. So how do we take ownership of the importance of sustainability, which I think everyone understands the importance of sustainability, or we certainly should do, and also how can we elevate procurement even more as a profession? And I think those two things go hand in hand. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Emma Peacock of Mars, the Global VP of Commercial Food, who has done some phenomenal things in palm oil and in rice and, well, working with Mars, which is a fantastic business on sustainability. Thomas Uderson, the CPO of Bayer, and also the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, and a colleague of mine on that. Also, a bit of a sustainable procurement legend, if you don't mind me saying, Tony. What Tony Roy at BT doesn't know about supplier engagement, risk, and carbon emissions and supply chain just isn't worth knowing. And of course, last but not least, Virginie Vast, who the head of procurement, innovation, and sustainability at Amazon Europe, and that is a job title I think I would love to have. And your experience at Vodafone and the Vodafone Foundation has been fantastic. You've got some great stuff to share. So thank you all for joining us. I hope we're going to have a great session. We haven't got much time, but we will no doubt race through some fantastic insights. So a little challenge for everyone that's listening in. We really want to know how much of a responsibility or an influence you feel you have in your roles to impact on sustainability. So if you'd like to call up the poll, guys, and in the poll, we would like to know, and we want you to be very honest with your answers. Do you feel like you're fully responsible for sustainability in your role? Do you feel like you're involved, but ultimately it's working with other functions? Do you want to be more involved? Do you feel that you could do more? Or is it really responsibility of another department and you don't really see it much in your role? So vote now. Be very honest. Panel, I'm very interested to see the results of this. I don't know about you.
Very much so.
This is where we have to change everything that we're about to say depending on what people answer, right? Testing our agile skills.
Absolutely. So very interesting results. Pretty much as I would have suspected, but one thing that strikes me there, I don't know about you guys, is as many people feel they're fully responsible as they feel they're not at all responsible, which is interesting. But as I said, I think it's really interesting. We've got people thinking that at least they are involved and they want to be more involved. So that is fantastic. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you as a panel a question. And I think many people, those listening in, say they want to be more involved and they want to involve other people as well. So in your experience, how do you engage your colleagues in procurement and in sourcing and perhaps in other departments to understand the value of sustainability? Who wants to pick that up first? Go on then, Tony.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it starts, with a very clear message from the top. And we in BT have been very fortunate at that. Our board has endorsed this. They picked it up very early. I mean, we set our first science-based target when back in 1992. And it's grown since then. So how do you involve procurement? It's kind of building that sense of pride. So in BT, we've done a number of firsts. So just to give an example, so BT actually use 1% of the UK's electricity, but 100% of that comes from renewable sources. Now that's huge. Not many companies can match that. The thing is, what we need to showcase is of that, what's procurement's role in that? So 2/3 of that carbon footprint is made up of supply chain. So our guys, in procurement have a stake in that, very, very big role to play. And so we bring that to the forefront all the time. So, I mean, many years ago, we involved procurement at the early stage of the sourcing process. So what we've done is we've built in, in our adjudication scores, 10% of the score is reserved for sustainability and ethical matters. So procurement have a very key role to play, and they use that all the time with our suppliers. So we know ourselves as a responsible company, and we want all our suppliers to be the same.
Excellent. So that's procurement having an impact on your business, but also the country in terms of the country's carbon footprint as well.
Absolutely.
Hey, who else has got thoughts on this?
Maybe I can build on that. So I think there's a couple of really good things happening right now, also in most organizations, that this understanding that there's a need for action is very broad. So there's not a lot of people who doesn't think that this is an important topic. I think that's very helpful. I also think that most part of the organization will recognize that procurement has a very unique position here, one that they should be leveraging, linked with the scope 3, as you said also, Tony, that there is, of course, recognition that most of the topics are imported also through your supply chains. I think what we have to do better is that we also need to come with practical solutions on how do you tackle this. What are the first steps? What are the second steps? And I think here our community is getting much better at having that conversation and even leveraging practices across industries on how can you copy paste and apply that in your context. But one of the big myths that we also need to get better at debunking is this whole notion that sustainability comes at a cost, that these are two mutually exclusive forces. I think this zero-sum mindset that exists in organizations, we need to come with use cases and show that in fact this is not true. It's a source of innovation, it's a source of value for the organizations, and that part we just need to be more comprehensive in how we talk about that. But I think we're on a good path.
Absolutely. So procurement responsibility to frame the value for the rest of the business is very important. So yeah, Emma, perhaps your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Thomas obviously is spot on. That there's two big priorities that all of our businesses have, and they are growth and they are talents. And sustainability is a route to access both. So to Thomas's point on demonstrating the power of innovation that can provide on the top line is where we can have a responsibility. We did a study recently internally where we just took 3 categories: coffee, bath products, and chocolates. Those that were selling non-sustainable products had an average growth rate of 2%. Those that were selling sustainable products were growing at 5%. So it's a very clear proposition for the business to enable them with sustainable solutions to deliver growth. And also, it attracts the best talent. The best want to work organizations with purpose. And 75% of millennials will do that for less money. So you can get the best for less. And then lastly, so beyond growth and talent, in procurement, how we tackle this, as we said, we need to bring to life for people what we really do. And what we really do in procurement brilliantly is we use our brains to create brilliant strategies. We use our brains to create brilliant deals. We know how to construct a deal. And the tricky bit well, not tricky, but the fun bit in sustainability is it's a long-term deal. It's not a short-term deal. And we also in procurement know how to bring people together. You need different people from parts of the supply chain. So we have those skills. You all have those skills in your brains. Let's just apply them in the categories that we're in.
Absolutely. Harnessing for procurement for good. There are some unique skills in procurement that are underappreciated sometimes that could be applied here. That's very, very true. Virginie, your thoughts?
Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, I mean, definitely resonate very much, with what Tony, Thomas, Emma are saying. I think maybe as a add-on link, to the poll that you were showing, Oliver. I think personally, I really truly believe that it's let's say a joint effort with procurement and the other function. I think procurement play a critical role in being this enabler, like a cross-functional enabler. first because we own, let's say, the supplier base, and we realize in many cases how much, let's say, sustainability team need the help of procurement to be able to make decision happen. We also the owner of processes, and you realize when you go through an end-to-end process how much sustainability impact almost all the steps, right? From onboarding to sourcing to decision, to audit, to innovation, and so on, right? So it's you actually interfere with, I would say, a majority of the business to be able to make sustainability happen. So I think it's a very unique role that procurement has that that we can leverage. Yeah. So for me, it's definitely a joint collaboration on that journey.
Yeah. And very conscious that if people want to ask questions, of course you can ask questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those afterwards. But that's all really interesting, guys. And one thing I know a lot of procurement professionals listening will be thinking is, well, that's all well and good because your CEOs or your boards or your brand gets sustainability, but perhaps my business doesn't, or my boss doesn't. So what would be your advice for people listening in who want to do more, as the poll suggested, but perhaps feel frustrated by their organization or being blocked by the processes or systems or people? Any thoughts on that, guys?
I think being able to articulate what's likely to happen in the next 3 to 5 years is important. I think most of us have customers out there, and most of us would have a procurement person sitting in those organizations talking indirectly to our CEOs. And I think here that, if we also accept that that's a joint challenge, we need to make sure that we all make it important. And with that, there will be a signal going to even the hardcore CEOs who doesn't necessarily want to engage at this stage. So I think here we have a big role to play, but also outline what is happening at the legislative level. And here, whether it's in UK or whether it's in an EU level, we see that there's a lot happening within that regulatory framework, which will naturally put the practices up at a higher level. And I personally enjoy to be more in control of my own destiny than having somebody tell me exactly what to do. And I think that is probably something that most CEOs would also share. So you got to stay ahead of the inevitable expectations that are coming through society.
Yeah. And if I can, let's say, build on what Thomas is saying on, around building, this case and explaining the value of it. I mean, we have to look at some of the headline of the newspaper, from time to time to realize that it's not just, a wish, but it's a reality, and it's important, to be tackled. And sustainability, as we know, is not only around reduction of CO2. Yeah, it's also ethical. It's a lot of, let's say, other criteria that is under it. And I think in demonstrating the value of sustainability, goes beyond procurement. There is definitely, and it's interesting when Thomas, you were saying it doesn't cost more. It can, right? I mean, let's be honest, we know some technology costs more, but you can actually also deliver savings from sustainability, right? Which is something I agree with Thomas, is not always, the first thought, because people think it costs, but there is an aspect where you can actually build a business case maybe to your CPO or to your CEO if need be, around cost savings, right? If you use less energy, if you use different way of doing, you can, let's say, influence the savings part. I think the other thing is around, let's say, risk mitigation, which I think is a very important part of our role. And having a good management of sustainability, also impact very greatly your brand, which we know can cost a lot. Yeah, so that's another thing. And I think the third element that I think of that can also support, let's say, the case, if it's not something in the culture yet, is around innovation and talent, like Emma was saying. I think you can also drive a lot of innovation with your supplier for your product and services that you sell to your end customer, and also definitely attract new talent, right? That, as we say, are driven by purpose. Yeah. So I think having those facts, and there is a lot of facts, right, externally that can support those 3 pillars. should help. And if really they're not heard, they can always apply to any of our company, right? We know it's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, if there can't be that many companies that don't get it, because if they don't, the investors, their customers are going to be demanding this if they aren't already, So, you can't just think about what I'm going to do. You got to be doing it right now, and that burning platform's already there. And there are lots of examples out there, and I'm sure we'll touch upon a few, like where people can play a role. And procurement's really great at that because we have the facts. We love dealing with facts and figures, and I've had loads of examples where I can very quickly demonstrate where to Thomas's point, that it doesn't have to cost more. In fact, over the longer term, it can actually cost less. In many cases.
Absolutely. So framing this opportunity for whoever you're trying to frame it for in the world that they want to hear it in. So money, risk, whatever. It doesn't have to be their hearts you go for. It can be their minds and their ego potentially as well. Whatever makes them want to help you. So any thoughts from you, Emma?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and this is a personal reality, is don't be too overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge. Yeah. It's very easy sometimes, and I've been there, where you sit there and you're like, I don't even know where to start. But I would argue with any one of you if you tell me that in your supply base, you haven't got one supplier in that supply base somewhere that's doing something cool on sustainability. You have so much influence over where you invest your spend. Even if you do a tiny thing with just one supplier who's doing it brilliantly, you get to demonstrate what's being done. So if we can't do the big impact, just find out who in your supply base is doing that great and start to take some personal responsibility to do it. Beyond that, I would also say, talk to the sales team. 3 weeks ago, I get pulled in because we can't supply product on one of our brands, and the sales team are going into Carrefour and they think they're going to get a roasting on the fact that we can't supply this product. Well, actually, all Carrefour wants to talk to them about is, when are you going to get us more recycled content in the packaging that we send them? And I can actually deliver recycled content. It does cost a bit more money, but the customers are prepared to pay for it, and it gives more leverage there. And we got caught a bit in the trap in the business of talking to finance. Just talk to the customers and sales team, because you have a much broader conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just going to get on to a second question I was going to ask, the key one, which was some practical advice. Now, we touched upon a couple of things there, Emma, and I know, Tony, you mentioned it, but if you can think of some specific examples where you've been able to embed sustainability into the way that you work in procurement, just to give some people a flavour of the sorts of things that they might do. Any thoughts and examples? And Tony, I'm sure you've got a whole host of these, so it'd be good to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the sort of mantra we have is that regardless of the maturity of the supplier, and some are less mature than others, as we know, everyone can play a role in this in some way or another. So, for instance, we give our suppliers a choice almost of the different areas they can work on. So for those that haven't even started on this journey, a great place to start for me, I would say, is CDP. Report your carbon impact or emissions to CDP. Start there. Yeah, so you might get a low score initially, but it gives you something to build upon. That's number one. Start using renewable energy. The cost of renewable energy these days is no more than your normal electricity. Like, if we can do it, in fact, we are extending our renewable energy deal to all our suppliers, and so that's a great and easy way to immediately drop or reduce your carbon emissions. That's the other thing. With more advanced suppliers, and we, as you know, we've been working with them for a long time, we've introduced a concept called the sustainability clause in our contract. So when we start a long-term contract with someone, what we do is the clause says very simply that you shall baseline the carbon associated with this contract. We didn't want them, measuring the whole enterprise. It was just that contract, that part of the contract, and then through the lifetime of the contract, commit to saving carbon there. And our success stories have been massive, with them. initially there's always a bit of hesitance in how do we start and that kind of thing. Again, BT are great at sort of helping suppliers, on the journey. We don't do everything for them, but we give them the guidance. And what we found is once they're on the journey, they stumble across lots of savings or opportunities. And finally, plastics. That's something everyone identifies with. So we've taken it on. Our plastics policy is to eliminate single-use plastics by 2025. Now, almost anyone, big or small suppliers, can play in that space. So these are some of the practical things that we use with our suppliers and supply chain, and it resonates very well with our procurement teams as well.
Excellent.
I think maybe two thoughts from me. So there's lots of industry forums in each of our category areas, and they don't always have representation from procurement people, but highly welcome the procurement thought when it comes, in my experience. And I think, so if I take rice, for example, for Mars, it's an area where we've been investing very heavily on farms. The Sustainable Rice Platform is the industry forum. Have a voice in your industry forum and say what you need for your business to make it work. So, for example, for Mars in rice, I want every rice buyer, whether you are a brewer, a food producer, a pet producer, to be in that rice platform, because it's the only way it will work. So figure out what your industry forum is and just be blunt with what will make these things work, so they value that input. And I've forgotten my second point, so we'll hand it to somebody else.
Thomas.
Yeah, so I think we have the benefit also in Bayer that, of course, what we are now advocating on the inbound supply chain side is totally integrated with our corporate strategy. So our CEO is also our Chief Sustainability Officer, and with that there's a lot of let's say consistency in the messages. And I think that's very practical. You've got to set the tone from the top, and you have to be prepared to walk away and walk the talk. So when it comes to, for example, very practical, we have made it very explicit that in our code of conduct, it's very clear that if you want to have any preferential treatment, you want to be a special treated supplier, you've got to have an EcoVadis score of green 45 plus. If you're not, you're simply not in the game. So that is consistently communicated in the procurement area as well as the suppliers. And I think once these messages come out there, you will see that people are also starting to take it super seriously. So I think that tone from the top is absolutely critical, and you can do it inside your processes, no problem.
Absolutely. Virginie, anything?
Yeah, I think as the panel was saying, I think there's definitely, let's say, great value of leveraging the partnership that you have. Partnership with suppliers, you can also learn massively from them because they are expert in the products, and sometimes that they sell or the services they provide. And I think you need to be kind of open, if I may say, to hear from them what the future could be and to also challenge the way we do things, right? I think is one. And then the partner we have on sustainability, right? CDP, EcoVadis, but also we partner, for example, with some audit companies on sustainability, and I think partnering with them, understanding, what the future is from their view, but also, as Emma was saying, also putting clearly on the table, if I may say, what is important for your business, right? Because they need our inputs to understand how they can also serve us as best, right? So I think it's as a partnership, which was linked to the first question around partnership internally with other function, but I think the ecosystem goes far beyond internal partnership, right? And the external one is as important to make sure you can meet the business need.
Excellent.
And if I may just build on that, Virginie, because I think that the word triggered a whole range of thoughts also from my side, and I think it's important. We've seen that also in COVID, the power of collaboration. That everybody, when we need a helping hand, and if you ask, you will find that it does exist. And we as Bayer has also been participating now almost 10 years in industry initiatives where Together for Sustainability is applicable for the chemical industry. Oliver, you talked about it being progress for the FMCG. I mean, there's a lot that you can do also with your competitors without breaking any of the rules that are linked to antitrust. So I think from a company within the industries, definitely there's a lot you can do to avoid duplication. And I think also as individuals, there are many people who are prepared to help you. And here, advocating a bit on the SPP.earth, but the Sustainable Procurement Pledge is just another platform where you will find that there are people who is just super happy to help. Just ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that more. I think both as businesses, but also as professionals, there is so much support out there from your peers who may be slightly ahead of you or slightly more experienced than you, or perhaps facing exactly the same challenges. And I think the Sustainable Procurement Pledge is a professional support network. CIPS is a fantastic professional support network. I think that's already there. But as I say, industry initiatives, you are almost always going to be part of an industry, or have the ability to be part of an industry initiative. I have a Google Doc of 180 different sustainable procurement initiatives in the world right now. Probably too many, but there's definitely not enough. So I would highly recommend that everyone has a little think about where they can join in and share the cost and the impact and with their peers. So
what I found is that people are willing to share their experiences in sustainability. This is not a competition; it helps all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is competitive advantage in there, but we've got to stay having a license to operate first, haven't we? So we've got some really great questions coming through. And as I said, some of these I think we've tackled already, but there's some really good ones. Obviously, how to tackle a situation when sustainability comes in direct conflict with the bottom line. I think we've talked about possibly the benefits longer term, but that's a good question. There's quite an interesting one here, though, is that when you have those conflicting targets, so buying from small to medium or minority-owned companies, but at the same time having to keep that supply base at bay, or not increase the number of suppliers, or potentially even reduce it. I mean, Mars, you've done this obviously on palm oil. You've actually looked at transparency in that and found that obviously naturally incredibly difficult. So you've actually taken the step to bring that supply chain more easily together, I suppose, and actually identify who you're working with. But any thoughts and examples about how you can manage those conflicting challenges sometimes?
I think there's a reality that when you're choosing a strategy, there's always going to be one, there's never a right answer, actually. But what's important is you actually just have to make a choice and invest heavily in to try and make that work. We just get caught in the trap sometimes of being halfway in between. And so thank you for raising palm. That gives me a nice lead in, is a great one where we found it's a huge supply base and we were buying from thousands of mills. And whilst there is an industry standard, it still didn't give us the transparency that we wanted. And so we made the choice to really consolidate where we are buying from. So over a period of time, we'll be buying from less than 25 mills, which gives us the opportunity to create that transparency. But the answer will not be the same for every category. I'm sorry to say it's not one size fits all, but what works for you in those individual categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? We've got plenty of questions to get through, so I'm going to ask another one, actually. A couple of ones that kind of blend together is the fact that we touched upon is that sustainability is such a wide range of issues, and procurement professionals already have a huge list of things they need to think about and talk to their suppliers about, from human rights to carbon emissions. How do you manage that huge spread of issues, and how do you help procurement professionals try to at least get an understanding of all of those issues in one go? How do you manage that challenge?
I think, as Emma was saying, I think it's important that we inform and commit the organization to look at all the aspects that are relevant for the particular category where they are responsible. And that may be slightly different. So if you are in palm oil derivatives, you've got to look at that one. If you are in conflict mineral derivatives, there are certain others. If you are in supply chains that have a large local content, you would be looking at supplier diversity. I think it's important that that menu of what is it we believe is integrated in sustainable procurement practices needs to be well understood. And it's, of course, economic, it's social, and it's financial sustainability. And we need to train our category leaders to have that captured in their strategies as and when that then gets rolled out. I think to Emma's point, that means in certain categories you make choices which will have an impact on the shape of your supply base. But that doesn't prevent you from having an impact on other areas, or even have an indirect impact. You can all model that, and that's what we have to do, and that's what makes procurement so amazing, and why it attracts clever people like everybody listening here, because there is, it's a big job.
I think of sustainability as another item of the specification, be it a quality spec, a technical spec. This is a sustainability spec. And either you choose to understand the sustainability spec and figure out how you leverage it, or you don't, sorry to be blunt. But that's just another lever that we know how to do well. It's a specification.
Absolutely.
And it's the right thing to do, right? So, it's got to be part of your sourcing strategy, etc. So, everyone needs to play a role in sustainability. It's, and ethical, human rights, for the right reasons.
I agree with Tony, and I think it's we also have a role as to be on, if I may say, on the driver's seat to some of those steps. So when you come, for example, to decision making, to the point of Emma of having criterias and making sure you build this awareness, I think if you include absolutely the sustainability criteria, for example, in decision making, in RFPs, in sourcing, it becomes a must and not just a nice to have. Yeah. Of course, it's a journey. And it takes awareness and proof of the business case and so on. But I think procurement has this privileged position to be able to influence this, because we are, let's say, the owner of the sourcing process. So I think it's one. And I think to your point, Oliver, around where do you start, or because there is so many elements that compose sustainability. I think my view is that you cannot address all of them, right? I mean, it's almost impossible. You have operation in, from our companies in almost every market. Things happens every day, and I think it's also important to focus and to know where you want to, really put a lot of effort. It can be related maybe to the biggest category you buy, because this is where you can have the most influence on sustainability or on your end customer. It can be the highest area of risk. So I think it's there's a key area of focusing on clear area, either it's risk, either it's spend, either it's, demand from the business. But I think it's important to do that first. Because as you said, Oliver, otherwise, I mean, it's I'm not going to say it's endless, list of topic, but almost, right? I mean, if you think, for example, of EcoVadis, which is one platform that helps, for example, the rating, they already have, let's say, 21, let's say, sustainability and CSR key theme, and on those, you have a myriad of other things. So I think for me, prioritization, focus, and to the point of Thomas, align what you do with the goals of the company. I know it's, it seems very, very simplistic said, but you can sometimes get, tracked into other route because it's a very overwhelming topic. So make sure you work towards the same goal.
Absolutely right. Before we finish, I'm going to ask all of the panelists to give me one very specific piece of practical advice, and it can be very short, just a sentence or two, for the people that are listening in. What's the one thing that you'd recommend they go off and do, or look at, or examine, or evolve? But before I do that, one final question that's coming through, and I can sort of see a trend in this, is supplier collaboration. So obviously in procurement, we've got very good at sending questionnaires to our suppliers and asking them for data and putting them through audits and checks and measurements and everything else. Obviously, we need to drive improvement in our supply chain. So how would you recommend you encourage your peers to actually start beginning to collaborate with suppliers? How can they do that at scale as well? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that Emma mentioned, which is join an industry association. That's probably a one that will get you straight off the ground, because there's lots of forums where you can share I mean, here in our ICT sector, we have the Responsible Business Alliance, we have the Joint Audit Cooperation, and other such forums where people can join. And these are great places to learn. Even I often join them, and I pick up new things every time. So I think that's definitely a good starting point.
So particularly if you share suppliers in your supply chain, there's an opportunity to use your support to collaborate and spend more time with those shared suppliers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts about collaboration with suppliers, guys?
I think it's also a matter of being transparent with them, right? I think, as you said, shouldn't associate sustainability with consequence management, because I think that would be the wrong message. Obviously, don't get me wrong, there is instances where you need to make a decision because it might not be to the standard or the requirement you have in your company. But I think the key theme is around how do you basically improve together on that journey, and you can use a score that you get from suppliers, even if today they are maybe not at the standard you wish, right? Is how do you work with them? Because I mean, supplier have worked with you for maybe years, right? And you don't want to start working with them because they don't meet one of the criteria, right? Or they need to improve on one criteria. So I think it's definitely working with them on improvement plan and having a clear action on what needs to be tackled per suppliers, and work with them, towards maybe some deadline and where you want improvement, and encourage the improvement, right? Celebrate the small step. I think it's important to work with them hand in hand in that sense, right? And to recognize, right? Say thank you to your supplier when they do something for your company or for your customer. I think it's as important as I would say, as a consequence management when you need to, because things do not go as per procurement wish. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know, Emma, from a Mars perspective, in fact, we're going to hear from Mars at the next Sustainable Procurement Pledge meeting about how you're collaborating more with suppliers and helping them, supporting them. Any thoughts from you about examples from your world?
I'd already moved on to the advice top tip. I wasn't thinking about that one. I think the reality is sustainability is a competitive advantage. Those that do it brilliantly will win in the market. Yeah. And so there's this tension of, we all want the system that everybody can use to fill in, which is what, broadly we have quality standards now that do that. It's a competitive, it's not a competitive advantage, it's a baseline. And that's where I think we will get to on sustainability. But in the meantime, the industry isn't that incentivized yet to make it the same everywhere, because it is a competitive baseline. And so I think as you collaborate with suppliers, try to use all of the tools that are used commonly out there. Yeah. But be conscious about where it is going to give you some competitive advantage too. But we should be heading towards that industry standard in future.
Absolutely. And before we go to our final top tips, I'd just add to that. I mean, certainly sustainable collaboration in the supply chain, I think, is crucial. I mean, there's some phenomenal examples. The industry groups do some great work. There's Manufacture 2030 in that's actually helping suppliers to improve on emissions. There's some fantastic platforms and technologies out there like GiveWith that are working with their supply chain. And it's great to see technologies thinking beyond just asking suppliers for information and actually helping those suppliers improve. So, but it is a minefield of technologies, and as I said, that's another one to think. So, final, quick, and I want one-line responses from all of you. What's your one top tip for the audience? Tony, over to you.
Yeah, set a net zero target as soon as possible if you haven't done.
Yes, Emma.
Start by educating yourself on the sustainability spec in your area. Just learn a little bit more than you do today.
Excellent. Thomas?
Don't walk alone. There's a lot of help, and reach out.
Amen. And Virginie?
Yeah, partner. Definitely partner. Supplier internally, like us today. We did a lot by connecting with each other. So definitely partnering.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. This has been fantastic. The dream team has delivered, I think it's safe to say. So thanks ever so much for all of your support. And I think that last point is the most important. You're not alone. Get the help, work together, and I think we can achieve some extraordinary things for procurement and also the planet. Thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.